morning sun rose over the vast, empty military training ground, casting long shadows across the dusty earth. The air was dry, with a faint chill that hinted at the coming heat of the day. Soldiers in crisp uniforms stood in formation, their eyes fixed straight ahead, waiting for the orders that would test not only their skill but their patience and endurance. At the center of this gathering was a general, a man whose reputation for strictness and precision was well known. His sharp eyes scanned the faces before him, evaluating each soldier's readiness, each twitch of confidence or doubt. Today he had a challenge, one that would push even the best-trained snipers to their limits. The mission seemed simple on paper: hit a target that lay a staggering 4,000 meters away. To most people, this distance would be unimaginable. A shot that far requires not just a steady hand but perfect calculation, understanding of the wind, temperature, bullet trajectory, and a deep focus that few could maintain. The general knew that even among his elite team, this would be a difficult task. Still, he had confidence that some of his soldiers could manage it. After all, they were some of the best snipers in the army, selected not only for their skill but for their composure under pressure. The soldiers were nervous but determined. They had trained for years for exercises like this, yet the enormity of the challenge made their hearts race. Each one knew that one small miscalculation could mean failure. They whispered to each other quietly, sharing tips and reminding themselves to stay calm. The target, barely visible through the scope from such a distance, looked tiny against the vast landscape, almost as if it could be missed even by the most accurate eye. The first soldier stepped forward, his rifle polished and gleaming in the sunlight. He adjusted the scope, measured the wind, and took a deep breath. The entire group held its collective breath. The rifle cracked, and the bullet soared into the distance, only to hit far from the target. A murmur went through the crowd. The general's face remained stern, but inside, a trace of doubt flickered. This was supposed to be a test of skill, and already failure had begun. One by one, the soldiers took their turns. Each calculated with care, each aimed with precision, yet the result was the same. The target remained untouched. The general had watched countless exercises in his career, but even he was surprised by the repeated misses. 13 soldiers, trained and experienced, had failed to strike the mark. The number itself was staggering. Each miss added to the tension, the silence stretching long and heavy over the training ground. The soldiers exchanged worried glances, unsure if anyone could succeed where so many had failed. As the sun climbed higher, the heat began to press down on the soldiers. Sweat formed on brows, not only from the physical strain but from the mental pressure. The general walked among them, observing their focus and technique. He gave no hints, no encouragement, only the quiet, steady presence of authority. He was testing more than skill today. He was testing composure, patience, and the ability to perform under pressure. The repeated failures had made the task seem impossible, and yet he knew that one accurate shot could change everything. The air was tense, almost electric. The soldiers' confidence wavered as doubt crept in. Could anyone actually hit the target? Was the task too difficult even for the best of them? The general paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the faces of his team. He had seen determination, courage, and skill, but he had also seen overconfidence and hesitation. This exercise would reveal the limits of each sniper, not just their ability to hit a target, but their ability to face failure and try again. Even from a distance, the target seemed like a speck, almost insignificant in size. Yet to the soldiers it represented the ultimate test, a challenge that could define their reputation and standing. The stakes were high, and the pressure was immense. Each soldier knew that one precise shot could restore pride and show mastery, while another miss could cement the day as a lesson in humility. As the general prepared to call for the next attempt, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The scene was quiet except for the occasional sound of rifles being adjusted and whispered instructions among the soldiers. Each person felt the weight of expectation, not only from the general but from themselves. The challenge was far from over, and the moment had only just begun. What seemed simple at first, hitting a target, had transformed into a battle of patience, precision, and focus. The story of this morning, of 13 misses and the relentless effort to overcome them, was only the beginning of something extraordinary, a prelude to a moment that none would soon forget. As the soldiers wiped sweat from their brows and readied their rifles for yet another attempt, a quiet figure stood to the side, almost unnoticed. She was a civilian, not part of the military unit, and her presence initially seemed out of place among the disciplined ranks. She carried herself with calm confidence, moving with a natural ease that suggested experience, though not the formal training that the soldiers had endured for years. Her eyes scanned the distant target, taking in the subtle shifts of light and shadow, the gentle sway of the tall grass, and the invisible movements of the wind across the wide field. The general, watching from a short distance, noticed her as well. He raised an eyebrow and, half in jest, half in curiosity, asked if she would like to try. The soldiers nearby laughed quietly, exchanging smirks and whispered jokes. Many of them doubted that a civilian woman with no military rank or battlefield experience could accomplish what they had repeatedly failed to do. 13 misses had already left the general questioning their abilities, and now, he seemed to be suggesting that someone from outside their ranks might succeed where his trained soldiers could not. Undeterred by the laughter or doubt around her, the woman stepped forward. She carried no arrogance, only a quiet focus that immediately drew attention. Her movements were deliberate, precise, and deliberate. She set down her rifle with care, checking the scope and adjusting her stance. The soldiers, still skeptical, watched closely, some with amusement, others with curiosity. The general himself studied her intently, intrigued by the calm determination she exuded. The first moment she raised the rifle, there was a stillness over the field. It was as if the usual chatter of doubt had paused, giving way to something more intense: anticipation. The soldiers had tried dozens of calculations, adjustments, and techniques, yet the target had remained untouched. Now all eyes were on her, waiting to see if she was merely another failed attempt or something extraordinary. She focused completely on the target, blocking out the laughter, the skepticism, and even the weight of the general's gaze. Her first step was to analyze the distance and conditions. Unlike the soldiers, who relied heavily on their training manuals and repeated formulas, she blended experience with instinct. She observed the direction of the wind, the subtle changes in light, and even the faint sounds of the environment around her. With each calculation, she adjusted her posture, her grip, and the aim of her rifle. Her mind moved quickly but precisely, weighing each factor that could affect the bullet's trajectory over the massive 4,000 meters. When she finally took the shot, the rifle cracked sharply, echoing across the open field. Everyone held their breath as the bullet sped toward the distant target. For a moment, it seemed like a test of imagination. The target was barely visible, like a tiny dot on the horizon. Then, almost imperceptibly, the bullet struck near the edge of the target. It was not perfect, but it was the first mark anyone had managed to make all morning. A low murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. The soldiers' eyes widened. The general's stern face softened slightly, betraying a hint of disbelief. The woman did not celebrate or acknowledge the reaction. Instead, she remained focused, analyzing the slight deviation and making mental adjustments. Where others had relied on sheer repetition, she relied on observation, patience, and careful correction. The tension on the field began to shift. What had seemed impossible a moment ago, the target at 4,000 meters, now seemed achievable, at least within the realm of possibility. The soldiers, who had started the day with confidence in their own abilities, now watched with a mixture of respect and apprehension. Her next shot was even closer to the bullseye. Each adjustment she made was small but calculated, and it demonstrated not only her technical skill but also her mental discipline. Unlike the soldiers, who had been visibly stressed by repeated failures, she maintained calm composure, as if the distance and difficulty energized rather than intimidated her. Every movement was smooth, precise, and controlled. The general, who had seen countless snipers over decades of service, could not hide his astonishment. His eyebrows rose, and a rare smile flickered across his face. This was no ordinary marksman. The soldiers began to realize that her success was not a matter of luck. She combined skill, observation, and intuition in a way that transcended traditional training. Her approach challenged their assumptions about who could perform under pressure. The quiet woman, initially dismissed and underestimated, had introduced a new standard of excellence that none of them had expected. The mood on the field shifted from doubt and mockery to admiration and silent awe. As she prepared for her next attempt, it was clear that this was not a one-time stroke of luck. The general, now fully attentive, encouraged her to continue. The soldiers watched in silence, some taking mental notes, others reflecting on their own repeated failures. The woman's presence, calm determination, and skillful execution had already begun to change the dynamics of the day. What started as a routine military exercise had turned into a lesson in humility, perseverance, and the power of quiet confidence. By the end of her initial attempts, it was obvious to everyone present that she was different. Not just in ability but in mindset. Where others had approached the challenge with anxiety and rigid reliance on past training, she approached it with clarity, focus, and adaptive intelligence. The soldiers and the general realized they were witnessing something rare, a person capable of defying expectations and achieving the seemingly impossible. This was only the beginning of a story that would soon become legendary, a moment when skill, patience, and courage combined to turn skepticism into amazement. The woman's first 2 shots had already caused whispers of astonishment among the soldiers, but she wasn't done yet. She approached the rifle with the same calm determination she had shown from the very beginning. There was no rush, no show of pride, only an intense focus on the target far away. The general, usually composed and reserved, leaned forward slightly, his curiosity now fully piqued. He had seen many sharpshooters in his career, but something about this woman's quiet confidence and precision demanded his attention. As she adjusted her stance and checked her scope, the soldiers watched her every move. Some of them had begun to question their own abilities, feeling the sting of repeated failure compared to her methodical approach. Even the most experienced among them could sense that she was doing something differently, something beyond what training manuals could teach. Her focus was complete. She seemed to block out the entire world, hearing nothing but the distant whisper of the wind and feeling nothing but the weight of her responsibility to the shot. The first step she took was careful observation. She studied the environment with the patience of someone who had done this countless times. The tall grass moved slightly in the wind, the heat rising from the ground created faint shimmering distortions, and the angle of the sun would affect how the target appeared through the scope. While the soldiers had tried to rely on calculators and standard formulas, she blended experience, intuition, and careful calculation. Her mind worked quickly yet calmly, balancing all the variables that could influence the bullet's flight over the incredible distance of 4,000 meters. Then came the crucial moment. She took her position, adjusted her breathing, and aimed once more. The entire field seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers, the general, and even the support crew watched in silence, almost as if the air itself was waiting to see the impossible happen. The rifle cracked sharply, and the bullet soared into the vast expanse. For a tense moment, it was impossible to see where it would land. All that could be seen was a tiny puff of dust in the far distance, signaling a hit. It wasn't dead center, but it was remarkably close, closer than anyone had managed that day. A wave of astonishment swept across the crowd. The soldiers could hardly believe it. They had spent hours trying, adjusting, and calculating, yet none had come near that mark. The general, who rarely showed emotion, let out a barely audible gasp of surprise. Even the toughest soldiers couldn't help but nod in acknowledgement. This wasn't luck. It was skill, and it was clear that the woman had mastered something the others had not. She didn't celebrate or speak. Her focus remained unbroken, as if the success of the first shot was just another step in a larger process. She analyzed the slight deviation, making mental notes and tiny adjustments to her aim. Each small correction mattered, because at such a distance, even the slightest error could mean missing the target by several meters. Unlike the soldiers, who had been weighed down by frustration and pressure from repeated failures, she used each moment to refine her technique, approaching the challenge as a puzzle to be solved rather than a test of ego. The The soldiers began to feel a mix of admiration and unease. Their confidence had been shaken, and the quiet civilian woman standing among them was demonstrating something they could not. The general, meanwhile, silently acknowledged that this was a rare moment, an opportunity to witness true mastery in action. He could see that her skill wasn't just technical. It was mental, a combination of patience, focus, and a calm that allowed her to perform under pressure. When she prepared for her next shot, there was a tangible shift in the atmosphere. The previous laughter and skepticism had faded, replaced by a charged anticipation. The soldiers leaned forward, studying her method closely, hoping to understand what made her so effective. They realized that she approached the rifle not as a weapon, but as a tool of precision. Every movement had a purpose. Every adjustment was calculated. Even the way she held her breath and squeezed the trigger was done with deliberate control, maximizing accuracy. The next shot was closer to the bullseye. The bullet hit with a precision that drew gasps from the soldiers and quiet amazement from the general. It became clear that her success was no accident. She was combining technical skill, observation, and mental discipline in a way that few could match. Her ability to remain calm and analyze the environment under pressure allowed her to achieve what the trained soldiers could not. The general, now fully attentive, began to recognize the significance of what was happening. He had seen many sharpshooters, but few had displayed the level of skill and composure this woman showed. Her performance was more than a display of marksmanship. It was a lesson in patience, focus, and perseverance. The soldiers, who had begun the day confident in their abilities, were now witnessing a masterclass in precision and determination. By the end of this part of the story, it was clear that she had earned the respect of everyone present. She had transformed what seemed like an impossible challenge into an achievable goal through calm focus, careful observation, and relentless practice. The atmosphere on the field had changed from doubt and tension to admiration and awe. What had started as a routine military exercise was now a moment of inspiration, showing that skill, patience, and determination could defy expectations and overcome even the most daunting challenges. After her first few shots had already stunned the soldiers and caught the attention of the general, the woman knew the real challenge was just beginning. Hitting the target once was impressive, but to truly master the 4,000-meter shot, she had to adjust for every subtle factor that could affect the bullet's trajectory. She didn't rush. Instead, she took a step back and studied the scene with meticulous care. Every tiny detail mattered. The gentle movement of the grass, the direction and strength of the wind, the heat rising from the dry ground, even the angle of sunlight that could affect her sight through the scope. She observed all of it with a patience that was almost extraordinary, as if she could feel the air itself guiding her calculations. The soldiers, still shaken by their repeated failures, watched in silence. Many of them had trained for years in long-range shooting, yet none had succeeded where she had already come close. They were beginning to realize that her skill went far beyond mere training. It was a combination of experience, intuition, and mental discipline. She didn't simply aim and fire. She analyzed, adjusted, and calculated, making each shot a result of careful thought rather than blind luck. She adjusted her rifle and scope with precise movements, checking every component. Even the slightest shift in her posture could affect the trajectory over such a long distance. She knew that at 4,000 meters, a small misalignment could send the bullet far off course. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm and deliberate. The field around her seemed to fade away as her focus narrowed entirely on the target. Every movement, every calculation, and every moment of patience brought her closer to the perfect shot. The general observed closely, his usual stern demeanor softening as he witnessed her methodical approach. He had seen many marksmen in his career, but this woman's process was different. She was blending science with instinct. She adjusted for wind and elevation, factoring in temperature and air pressure. Unlike most soldiers who relied on standardized formulas or past experience, she adapted to the present moment, reading the subtle cues from the environment and letting her mind make split-second corrections. It was a level of precision and awareness that left the general quietly impressed. As she prepared to fire again, The soldiers noticed how composed she remained. Where they had felt pressure and stress with each attempt, she appeared to thrive under it. Her calmness was contagious, drawing a sense of quiet awe from those around her. Even the skeptics who had laughed earlier were now silent, realizing that her approach wasn't just effective, it was masterful. The anticipation in the air was almost tangible. Everyone understood that what she was about to attempt required not only skill but a rare mental clarity that few possessed. She adjusted for the wind first. She observed the direction the tall grass swayed and watched the slight dust patterns rising from the ground. With a subtle twist of her scope, she accounted for these natural movements, understanding that even the gentlest breeze could shift a bullet's path over thousands of meters. Then she considered the angle of the target relative to her position. She knew that the curvature of the earth and the drop of the bullet over distance would affect where her shot landed. Each factor was small, almost imperceptible, yet at this distance they were crucial. The soldiers were starting to feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about hitting a target anymore. It was about demonstrating the power of focus, patience, and adaptability. They realized that her repeated near-perfect shots were the result of more than natural talent. They were the result of careful study, mental discipline, and the ability to remain unshakable under pressure. The general, who had initially been amused by her presence, now nodded subtly, acknowledging her skill. He understood that she had introduced a new standard of precision, one that few had achieved even in years of military training. When she finally fired her next shot, there was a sharp crack, followed by a tense silence as everyone watched the distant target. The bullet flew with incredible speed and accuracy, guided not only by physics but by the woman's keen observation and adaptability. It struck the target closer than any previous shot, demonstrating her ability to adjust for every variable with precision. The soldiers exchanged looks of disbelief, and even the general allowed a small smile to cross his face. This was more than impressive, it was inspiring. Her calm, deliberate process had a powerful effect. The soldiers began to reflect on their own methods and the mistakes they had made in earlier attempts. They realized that success was not about rushing or relying solely on training. It was about patience, observation, and the willingness to adapt. The woman's approach was a lesson in mastery, showing them that true skill required both mental and physical precision, along with the humility to learn from every moment. By the end of this part of the story, it was clear to everyone present that she was not just talented. She was extraordinary. She had turned what had seemed impossible into something achievable through focus, discipline, and careful observation. The general and soldiers alike had learned an unspoken lesson. That skill could come from unexpected places, and that determination, combined with intelligence and patience, could overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. The stage was now set for the moment that would become legendary, the critical shot that would leave everyone amazed. After carefully analyzing the environment, adjusting for wind, elevation, and temperature, the woman was ready for the critical shot. The soldiers and the general watched in tense silence. Every eye in the field was fixed on her, and every heart seemed to pause, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The morning had already been full of suspense and amazement, but this moment carried the weight of expectation and possibility. A perfect shot at 4,000 meters was not just difficult, it seemed impossible. Yet the woman approached it with a calmness that made the impossible seem achievable. She raised the rifle to her shoulder, her hands steady and her posture perfect. Each movement was deliberate, a product of years of practice and mental discipline. She took a deep, measured breath and exhaled slowly, steadying her heartbeat. The tension in the field was almost unbearable. Soldiers who had trained for years in sniper exercises felt their own nerves tighten, watching someone so composed achieve what they could not. The general, who had remained calm throughout the morning, now leaned forward slightly, fully aware that he was witnessing a moment few would ever forget. Her eyes focused through the scope, scanning the tiny, distant target. It seemed almost impossibly small from this distance, a speck against the vast landscape. But she did not flinch. She had already accounted for every factor. The subtle breeze brushing across the field, the shimmer caused by heat waves rising from the ground, and even the drop of the bullet over the long distance. Where others had relied mostly on manuals and repetition, she relied on observation, experience, and her ability to adapt in real time. She knew that precision over such a distance required more than technical skill. It required complete mental clarity and patience. As she aimed, the soldiers whispered to each other, barely daring to breathe. This was a moment of tension and suspense that words could not capture. They had seen her near-perfect shots, but this was the shot that would define everything. It would prove whether her skill was extraordinary or merely impressive. The general's eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment, the usual stern expression softened with anticipation. He had seen many marksmen in his life, but he knew that this woman had a rare combination of talent, discipline, and calm under pressure. Finally, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked sharply, echoing across the vast training ground. All eyes followed the path of the bullet, as if everyone could watch it fly. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, the kind of silence that makes hearts pound faster, where every person on the field felt the weight of the impossible. Then, far in the distance, a small puff of dust appeared at the exact center of the target. The bullet had hit perfectly. It was the shot that no one had believed possible, the shot that had eluded even the most trained soldiers. A stunned silence followed for a heartbeat. Then, almost simultaneously, gasps and whispers of awe spread across the field. The soldiers' jaws dropped. They had seen failures and near misses all morning, and now a single shot had done what none of them could. The general, who had rarely allowed emotion to show on his face, could not hide his amazement. A small smile appeared, and his eyes shone with genuine admiration. This was no longer just a training exercise, it was a demonstration of extraordinary skill and focus. Even in the face of such success, the woman remained calm. She did not celebrate, did not raise her arms, did not smile. Her focus remained steady, her eyes still on the target, as if this perfect shot was just another step in the process. This composure added to the awe surrounding her. Everyone realized that her achievement was not the result of luck or chance. It was the product of meticulous preparation, mental discipline, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She had achieved what the soldiers had struggled with all morning, and she had done it with an ease that was both humbling and inspiring. The soldiers began to process what they had witnessed. They had trained for years, yet this civilian woman had accomplished what they could not. The lesson was clear. Skill was not only about formal training or rank. It was about patience, focus, and the courage to trust your knowledge and instincts. The general stepped forward, his voice steady but full of respect, acknowledging her extraordinary accomplishment. He praised her technique, her composure, and her ability to achieve what so many had failed to do. It was a rare moment of recognition, and it carried the weight of respect from one of the most experienced military leaders in the field. As the woman lowered her rifle, the energy on the field changed. Skepticism and doubt were replaced by admiration and inspiration. The soldiers, once confident in their own abilities, now recognized the value of patience, observation, and disciplined practice. The lesson went beyond shooting. It was about approaching challenges with focus and clarity, about trusting skill and experience over fear and doubt. The general's acknowledgement further emphasized the significance of the moment, turning what had begun as a routine exercise into a story that would be remembered for years. By the end of this moment, it was clear to everyone present that the woman had done something remarkable. She had faced an impossible challenge, adjusted for every factor, and executed a perfect shot. The lesson was simple yet profound. Talent, discipline, and composure could achieve what others thought impossible. The field that morning had witnessed not just skill but mastery. This critical shot was the turning point, the moment when doubt turned into respect, skepticism into awe, and failure into inspiration. The moment the bullet hit the target perfectly, the atmosphere on the training ground shifted completely. The soldiers who had once smirked at the woman's presence were now silent, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. 13 of their own had failed repeatedly, but this civilian woman, calm and composed, had achieved what they could not. The general, usually stern and reserved, allowed himself a small but genuine smile. He had witnessed extraordinary sharpshooters before, but there was something about this woman's precision and focus that was unlike anything he had ever seen. The soldiers gathered around her, some still in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Whispers of admiration began to spread, quietly at first, then growing louder. "How did she do that?" one muttered. "It's like she can see the bullet's path before it even leaves the rifle," said another. Their skepticism had melted away, replaced by respect and curiosity. Even those who had doubted her skills now watched with open eyes, realizing that they were witnessing mastery in its purest form. The general stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. His voice, steady and calm, carried across the field. He acknowledged her achievement with words full of respect and admiration. He praised her for not only hitting the target at an impossible distance but for doing so with a level of composure, focus, and calculation that few could ever achieve. "What you have done here today is extraordinary," he said. "It is a lesson for all of us, and a reminder that skill and talent can come from the most unexpected places." Her demeanor remained unchanged. She did not boast, smile, or seek recognition. She simply lowered her rifle and nodded in acknowledgement of the praise. There was humility in her confidence, a quiet assurance that spoke volumes. She had focused entirely on the task at hand, not on the approval of others. This combination of humility and extraordinary ability impressed everyone even more. The soldiers realized that her achievement was not just about hitting a target. It was about the mindset she brought to the challenge, patience, observation, and the ability to remain unshaken under pressure. The soldiers began to reflect on their own repeated failures. They had relied heavily on training, experience, and formulas, yet none of them had succeeded where she had. They began to see that there was more to precision than rigid techniques. The woman had demonstrated that adaptability, awareness of the environment, and mental focus could surpass even years of formal training. Her presence had turned what seemed like an impossible task into a lesson in humility, showing that mastery often comes from unexpected sources. The general, now fully attentive, spoke directly to the soldiers about the importance of recognizing talent wherever it may appear. He emphasized that skill was not always tied to rank, experience, or tradition. Sometimes it came from someone who approached challenges differently, someone who observed keenly and adapted carefully. The lesson was clear. Do not underestimate anyone based on appearance or background, and never dismiss the power of focus, discipline, and patience. As the realization spread among the soldiers, the mood on the field changed completely. What had begun as a routine training exercise had transformed into a moment of inspiration. The soldiers now looked at the woman with a new understanding, seeing not just her technical skill but the calm, methodical approach that had allowed her to succeed. They began to see themselves differently, too, recognizing that there was always more to learn, more ways to improve, and more approaches to achieving excellence. The general invited the woman to explain her process, and she shared her observations and methods with quiet clarity. She described how she adjusted for wind, distance, heat, and the slight movements of the terrain. She explained how remaining calm and patient allowed her to make each shot with precision. The soldiers listened intently, realizing that her techniques were practical, adaptable, and replicable, but only if approached with the same mindset of focus and humility. The crowd of soldiers and onlookers slowly erupted in applause. The woman had earned not only their respect but their admiration. She had shown that true skill was not just about formal training or repeated practice, but about a combination of preparation, observation, mental clarity, and composure. The general nodded with approval, acknowledging that her success had created a moment that would be remembered and retold within the military for years to come. By the end of this part of the story, the woman had become a symbol of precision, patience, and perseverance. She had taught a lesson that went beyond sharpshooting. She had shown that humility, careful observation, and the courage to approach challenges differently could achieve extraordinary results. The soldiers, the general, and everyone present understood that this moment was historic, a turning point that demonstrated how determination, skill, and composure could surpass expectations and defy doubt. From that day forward, the story of her achievement spread through the ranks and beyond. She inspired soldiers and civilians alike, becoming a symbol of what could be accomplished through focus, patience, and unwavering confidence. The training ground, once filled with doubt and skepticism, now echoed with admiration and a renewed understanding of excellence. The woman's skill, humility, and determination had not only completed the impossible task but had left a lasting legacy, a story that would motivate and inspire countless others to reach for heights they once thought unattainable. After the perfect shot and the immediate reactions of awe and admiration, the soldiers and the general began to reflect on what had just happened. The event was no longer just a display of sharpshooting. It had become a lesson in skill, mindset, and the unexpected ways excellence can reveal itself. The woman's calm, precise, and methodical approach had left a profound impression. For the soldiers, it was a moment of humility, forcing them to recognize that mastery isn't solely defined by years of formal training or experience. Talent and determination can come from surprising places, and success often depends on patience, observation, and mental clarity. The soldiers, who had initially doubted her, now saw her as a model of what discipline and focus could achieve. They realized that their repeated failures had been due not to a lack of ability, but to their approach. They had been tense, overconfident, or overly reliant on rigid techniques. In contrast, she had approached the challenge with a blend of careful calculation, intuition, and calm concentration. Every adjustment she made was thoughtful, and every movement was deliberate. She had proven that achieving extraordinary results required more than technical skill. It required mental mastery. The general took this moment to speak to the soldiers, emphasizing lessons that went far beyond sharpshooting. He highlighted the importance of observation and adaptability, the value of patience under pressure, and the significance of humility. He explained that true skill often emerges when one combines knowledge with careful attention to detail and the ability to remain composed, even in stressful situations. His words carried weight because they came from someone who had trained and led soldiers for decades, someone who had seen countless experts fail or succeed. When he praised the woman, he was not only acknowledging her extraordinary skill, but also teaching the soldiers that learning could come from anyone, anywhere, and at any time. The soldiers began to reconsider their own approach to challenges. They reflected on how easily doubt and ego can interfere with performance. They realized that it wasn't enough to rely on past experience or brute force. One had to be observant, adaptable, and mentally resilient. The woman's success had shown them that even the most difficult tasks could be accomplished if approached thoughtfully and with calm determination. She had transformed a seemingly impossible shot into a tangible demonstration of what focus and preparation could achieve. The event also taught a broader lesson about underestimation and bias. Initially, many had doubted her because she was a civilian and because she was a woman in a predominantly male environment. Their skepticism had been rooted in assumptions rather than facts. Her performance shattered these preconceived notions. She had proven that skill is not limited by rank, gender, or background, and that anyone who dedicates themselves to mastery can achieve extraordinary results. This lesson resonated deeply with the soldiers, encouraging them to approach challenges and people with an open mind and respect for talent in all its forms. For the general, the woman's performance was a powerful reminder of the value of observation, humility, and openness. He had always respected skill, but seeing it demonstrated in such an unexpected way reinforced the idea that learning is never limited to formal training or conventional wisdom. He began to discuss with his team how they could apply these lessons in future exercises and even in real combat situations. Precision, patience, and careful analysis could make the difference between failure and success. He made it clear that it wasn't just about hitting targets, but about the mindset and discipline behind the action. The woman herself remained modest throughout the process. She never sought recognition or applause. Her focus had always been on the task, not on the approval of others. This humility amplified the impact of her achievement. The soldiers began to understand that true mastery includes self-discipline and composure, not just skill. Her calmness in the face of pressure had been just as important as her ability to calculate wind, elevation, and distance. It was a lesson in how attitude, mindset, and focus can elevate raw ability into something remarkable. By the end of the day, the soldiers had internalized the lessons in multiple ways. They understood that mastery comes from preparation, focus, and adaptability. They learned that obstacles, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with patience and persistence. They realized that humility and observation are as critical as technical skill. And perhaps most importantly, they saw that exceptional talent can emerge from unexpected places, challenging assumptions and inspiring others. The general, soldiers, and everyone who witnessed the event left with a newfound respect for the woman and a renewed understanding of excellence. The story of her achievement became more than a sharpshooting legend. It became a lesson in mindset, resilience, and the potential that lies in each person when they approach challenges with clarity and determination. It was a moment that would be remembered, discussed, and shared, not just for the technical feat, but for the lessons it offered about perseverance, focus, and humility. The day ended with reflection. The soldiers, inspired and humbled, spoke quietly among themselves, each contemplating how they could apply these lessons to their own training and life. The general continued to emphasize the importance of patience, observation, and respect for talent, ensuring that the story of this extraordinary achievement would resonate long after the training ground had emptied. The woman had not only completed the impossible task, but she had also left a lasting legacy of wisdom, skill, and inspiration that would continue to influence everyone who witnessed it. The day of the remarkable shooting exercise ended, but its impact was far from over. The woman's perfect shot had not only stunned the soldiers and the general, but had also left a lasting impression that would be remembered for years. Her achievement was more than a technical feat. It had become a symbol of determination, skill, and the unexpected power of calm focus. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment where assumptions were shattered and expectations exceeded. As the soldiers gathered their equipment and began to leave the training ground, conversations were filled with admiration and reflection. They discussed her methodical approach, her patience, and the clarity of her mind under pressure. Some admitted to feeling humbled, realizing how much their own confidence had been shaken by repeated failures. The general walked among them, speaking quietly about what they had learned that day. It was clear that the event had left an indelible mark on both the soldiers and the leadership. The woman herself remained humble. She did not boast about her achievement, nor did she seek attention. For her, the focus had always been on the challenge, on understanding the target, the wind, the distance, and her own skills. She had treated the impossible task as an opportunity to apply her knowledge and discipline, and in doing so, she had proven that preparation, focus, and patience can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Her quiet confidence left a stronger impression than any display of arrogance could have. Word of her accomplishments spread quickly within the military circles. Officers and soldiers shared the story of how a civilian woman had hit a target at 4,000 meters after 13 failed attempts by trained snipers. The story became legendary, not because of the distance or the technical details alone, but because it demonstrated something deeper, the power of mental discipline, observation, and perseverance. It reminded everyone that talent is not always found in the expected places, and that extraordinary results often come from those who approach challenges with focus and patience. In the days and weeks that followed, the soldiers often reflected on the lessons they had learned. They began to incorporate her methods of observation and calm focus into their own training. They realized that the repeated failures they had experienced were not a reflection of incompetence, but of approach. They had rushed, allowed frustration to build, and relied too heavily on rote techniques. The woman's example showed them that adapting to the situation, analyzing carefully, and maintaining composure were just as important as raw skill. The general also recognized the significance of this lesson. He spoke to his teams about how success often comes from unexpected sources and that respect for talent should never be limited by rank, gender, or background. Her performance became a teaching example, a story that illustrated the value of patience, mental focus, and humility. It was used not only to inspire soldiers but also to encourage them to remain open to learning from anyone, anywhere. Her achievement had transformed from a single perfect shot into a lasting lesson in leadership, training, and personal growth. For the woman, the experience reinforced her own understanding of mastery. She knew that achieving excellence required preparation, observation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Her performance had been extraordinary not because it was easy, but because it required an alignment of skill, mindset, and determination. She had turned what others had seen as impossible into something achievable, showing that dedication and focus can overcome doubt and challenge. Her story inspired others to believe that they too could achieve what seemed out of reach if they approached their goals with patience, discipline, and confidence. The event also had a subtle cultural impact. It challenged assumptions about who could excel in fields traditionally dominated by men or those with formal training. Seeing a civilian woman succeed in a task that even the most experienced military personnel had struggled with open minds. It reminded everyone that skill is universal, and that excellence is defined not by status but by effort, intelligence, and focus. Her success became a symbol of breaking barriers and defying expectations, inspiring both men and women to pursue mastery in their own ways. Over time, the story of that day became part of military lore. The training ground where it happened became a place where soldiers would recall the lesson: never underestimate anyone, always observe carefully, and approach challenges with patience and focus. The woman's achievement became more than a technical success. It became a source of motivation and inspiration, a reminder that extraordinary results come to those who combine skill with composure and thoughtful strategy. Even years later, those who were present would recount the story with awe. The lesson remained clear: focus, preparation, and calm determination can achieve what others believe is impossible. Her success became a legend, not just for the incredible 4,000-meter shot, but for the mindset and mastery it represented. It was a story about patience, skill, humility, and the courage to face a challenge head-on. Through her performance, she had left a legacy that would inspire soldiers and civilians alike, reminding everyone that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that the right combination of preparation, observation, and courage can turn even the impossible into reality.